All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to ClutchCast. This is going to be the very first episode of an ongoing podcast that I'll be doing with content creators and friends of mine from around the platform, and even just in my own personal living situations. I might bring friends and family onto this, but for the most part, it's going to be content creators so that you can get to know them a little bit better and understand them better as people. For the first guest on the podcast, we're going to have Mr. Zero Craig. You can go ahead and say hello, introduce yourself, and let the people get to know you a little better.
How's it going, guys? Hello. That's
Mr. Mr. Craig here is a fairly renowned YouTuber in the For Honor scene. Not only does he do content creation, but he also does scrims and tournaments in the competitive side of things, which is extremely impressive to be able to do both, especially considering it takes a very special kind of person to be able to create content, but it takes an extra special person to be able to completely master aspects of a certain kind of game or a genre, which is something that you've managed to do with both sides of it. And I was just kind of going to ask, what exactly was the thing that made you transition from content creation into the side of competitive things, and how do they kind of coincide with one another?
Well, I mean, I wasn't planning on it. I didn't have any aspirations for competitive play. To be honest, the game just stopped being fun on a casual level. It was just the same button mashing stuff for me, from my perspective, every day. And I was always a flex player, which I still am in the team I play in. Whatever the team needs, I play that character and learn them. So like at the time, I would play a character and learn them for a video. So I was playing characters and learning them for memes. And I mean, now I'm playing characters and learning them for tourneys, but it was the same mentality. I got a video coming up, I got to play this character, figure a little bit about him, what's funny about the way this character plays, what's unusual, what stands out, and then you kind of hone in on that and you use it for your content or whatever, or what in relation to the fantasy of this type of character makes for good memes, XD and all that shit. But I was going to drop For Honor because I was bored at that level of play. I was like, all right, the game's boring now. What do? I either stop or I make an attempt at seeing if there's depth to the game on a serious level. So I made an attempt at seeing what kind of depth there was on a serious level, and as I had anticipated at that time, like even back then, like 1v1s were a joke. But it turned out that there was quite a lot of depth to the team objective modes in For Honor because they encapsulate more gameplay. So there's 4 scenarios in For Honor. You have 1v1, 1vx, xv1, and xvx, and all 4 are different skill sets. So the combination of the 4 and the addition of objectives added to that provided a lot more depth than I expected. So I just kept trying to improve, and eventually a team asked me to play for them.
So what was the initial draw from the 1vx, xv1, and 1v1 scenarios? Which one did you actually start off in being good at, and did you work your way into the others? Is there a certain preference that you have?
Yeah, for sure. Like in 1v1s of For Honor, I've never enjoyed 1v1s of For Honor. They've always seemed very shallow to me. Like even back on my console days when I initially began, it seemed very heavily matchup favored to a very small number of the cast, and then onto PC and continuing on to the current day, the same thing applies. And console had the addition of feeling very sluggish. Even at that time when I was a console player, I always felt the game was very unresponsive, which it still is. So I always geared towards like 1vx and xvx. They were always my favorite scenarios. And I think to be fair, I think that would be most people's favorite scenarios. If you can win them, they're the ones that bring the most satisfaction. If you 1v certain number of people and you win, that's a big dub. Like if you xvx and you win with your boys, that feels like a big dub as well, like in a big team fight.
Right, and then when you have the opposite side of the spectrum.
Although it may I've often lost XV1s in tournaments, Because there's lots of different scenarios XV1s, and it's a very, very underrated skill in For Honor to be low health and able to assure a gank on a guy who was full health. That is very, very hard to do, because there was so much room for him to make counterplay when your health is low. It's a very, very easy anti-gank. What we always say in the comp scene is that it's very winnable. So it's actually against your favor, because, you know, you have the additional revenge mechanic, you have feats involved, and then you have matchups and how these different things interact at high level. So, but to the outside, you're looking at that and you're like, oh, they have more numbers than they have, so they're favored. And it's always kind of like a more lame win. Like, obviously, to have 2 versus 1, then 1 versus 2. Like, one win is obviously lamer than the other.
But the satisfaction is kind of the same whenever you have like low health and you're put in that situation.
If you're 2 5 HP guys and you're ganking a guy with 150 HP on Lawbringer, I mean, and he goes to 0, I mean, that's an incredible gank.
It is. And there was a couple of 100 to 0 combos that I've seen that required like very specific composition.
Yeah, they're very rarely used in top level play because you actually can't avoid the revenge popping. So like your goal as a ganker is to kill someone with no counterplay. I mean, that's like the ideal goal. Like, that's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to optimize. But they've nerfed ganking quite a lot in For Honor over the years. So it's not. There's different strategies now used very, very commonly that were never used before. What you do is you do a gank for 90 damage, and then one guy will leave, leaving the other guy who is the better duelist to finish the fight.
So do you believe that the tag system that they implemented as far as revenge, do you think that made it stronger or weaker with this? And I can explain the tag system. Is that before you had a certain amount of revenge given per attack by individual, but now they have a set percentage of revenge that is given from classifiable attacks. So a light attack will give a certain amount of revenge, a heavy attack will give a certain amount of revenge, a guard break will give a certain amount of revenge, and a unblockable will give a certain amount of revenge. But it's only based on if you're hit by 1vx, 1v2, you know, all those factors. When in a 1v1 situation, it doesn't apply anymore. So that's the tag system, and that wasn't how it used to work. But do you think that made it stronger or weaker?
I mean, it made things weaker for sure, but like it makes more sense for the game too. I mean, there's a strange myth in the For Honor community that, you know, competitive players want the game to be unfun and they want it to be optimized a certain way, but it's entirely untrue. The vast majority of competitive players left the game because it was unfun at competitive level. I mean, why would you play? They weren't having fun. The game wasn't fun there. For the ones that stuck through it, they're trying to gear and push it towards that direction. Obviously, the balance between outnumbering someone and being outnumbered is a very delicate and difficult one to figure out. But, I mean, they went the right direction with those changes, but there are severe issues with them at the same time.
That makes sense. So, who was it initially that got you into the competitive scene? I assume you had some form of a motive to get in. So, was it somebody like Clutchmeister, Alernakin, Barak Yeet, or Scorebrand? Was it any of those individuals?
I mean, it wasn't any of them in particular that motivated me to get involved in the competitive scene. What motivated me to get involved in the competitive scene was I was going to drop the game. So my choice was drop the game or see if the game gets more interesting if you try harder. Like, those were my options. Otherwise,
so it was just a method of freshening it up?
Yeah, it was an attempt at maintaining, like, interest in the game. If there was no depth to the competitive scene, I would have left the game.
Okay, and during the time that you were extremely bored with it, did you have any other games in particular that you would have moved on to, or did you have a content style that you would have preferred, possibly a variety content style?
I was considering single-player games, and the videos would be like once a month. They'd be like more like projects than gameplay videos.
So things along the lines of, let's say, the Polybius video by Ahoy. That's more along the lines of a project, right? That's
yeah,
what you'd say?
I actually watch very little YouTube.
Okay.
So I don't get the reference. I'm aware of what's going on YouTube, but I don't watch YouTubers.
Well, the Polybius video was an in-depth study on a game, and by game I mean an arcade game called Polybius, which is a reference to an ancient god that was, I believe, the god of balance. It was a game rumored to have existed, but there was no definable evidence that considered it real, but there was rumors all around the world talking about it. And one guy did a study way back in time and then continued building up until present day and found people that had connections to it, only to prove that it was a myth. Would you say that that is what you're thinking about when you're saying a project, or are you thinking about...
No. I was thinking more like... God, it's very hard to describe because I never had a solid idea of it at the time even. I was thinking more of, I would play through God of War, then I would go through God of War like it was an English literature piece. But it's a game.
Okay, so a story retelling, more like a theatric style?
Well, it's not like Vadividya, where it's just, this is lore. It's more like how everything... You break down everything in the game that works, and then you bring it all together to give a picture of how all these parts become more than the sum of their parts.
So kind of like clockwork. You're picking apart the pieces and showing people how it works and describing the art that follows through with the game.
Yeah, it's almost like the art of game design. That is the direction I would have gone.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and that's actually pretty interesting. I would have loved to have seen something like that from you. That's just me personally, though. By the way, I like the Vadi Video reference, one of my favorite creators.
I mean, he's a great content creator.
So, what initially inspired you to create a YouTube channel, and what was your main motivation behind it? What was your content that you wanted to create before you got started on all of this and kind of learned the ins and outs of everything?
Well, it's a funny question because there's a lot goes behind it. I mean, it was kind of like my personal human development or my personal development, where I realized far, far too late that I didn't want to do 9 to 5. I wanted to like go my own road and make income in on whatever my own merits were. Like, I didn't know what those merits were. Like, I'm hoping they are producing content. That's why I'm still here. But I couldn't do 9 to 5. It was really, really bad for my mental health. And working in a very corporate structure and doing a bachelor's and doing a master's, it was doing my mental health no good. And I couldn't figure out what the fuck was going on. So eventually I was just like, I can't do it anymore. I literally couldn't. I was in a really bad way for many, many years. I said, I just got to figure out another way, another career, anything. I was willing to throw at anything. But I was too old to pick up a sport and try that. I was too old to like do another undergraduate in another field. So I was like, okay, well, what kind of entrepreneurship is available to me in this day and age? I was like, well, I'll give content creation a go. I never edited before, and I never streamed before, and I didn't watch YouTube, and I'd never watched Twitch. But I just said, fuck it, I'll give it a shot. And I gave it a shot, and I enjoyed it. And initially, I learned to edit. Actually, how I learned to edit actually is a funny story, because I didn't sleep for about almost 3 days. I spent on Sony Vegas. My very first video that was highly edited was the Life of Peacekeeper, the Life of Console Peacekeeper, I think it's called.
Right, I've seen that one. I remember it.
That was the very first time I spent editing. And that video took me like 60 hours-ish. God, I was almost fucking hallucinating when I finished it. And at the beginning of that video, I didn't know how to cut a clip.
Jesus Christ.
And at the end of the video, well, you can see the video. You can watch it if you're interested.
Well, on my end, I was in the same boat. I actually had somebody else teach me.
I learned quite a lot of my editing in the first 60 hours. It was weird. It was one of those things where you feel like you have to finish it. I don't know if you've experienced that feeling, but it's like, it's not over until I finish it.
Right. I think I do understand that feeling. I just had to
keep going and keep going. Like, I would have stayed awake longer, but eventually I did finish.
I think what that is just kind of a calling that hits your mind. It's like, I finally found something that I think I can do, and so I'm not going to stop until it's done, even if it hurts. Like, and it doesn't seem like it's something that important to you after the fact or even before the fact, but the moment you start doing it, you're hooked.
I mean, I don't know how you'd explain it. I just started and I was like, well, I gotta finish. That was just kind of it.
And did you learn how to edit anything else from other creators, possibly? I know that you're friends with Flukerson, so did he ever help you out with anything?
Yeah, Fluke is very, very clever on his edits, and particularly because Fluke edited with different software as well. And he's naturally very good with that stuff. I can't speak to a specific thing that Fluke taught me to edit, but I know there would be maybe a couple of tricks that I would have picked up from Fluke, or that I would have asked Fluke's advice for. Something like that.
So after all the time that you've spent editing, do you still use Sony Vegas, or have you moved on to something like After Effects or what?
As much as I would have loved to move on from Sony Vegas, I haven't spent the 40 to 50 man hours required to learn another software program. Like, if I could recommend a software program to someone right now, I would recommend Adobe. I would not recommend Vegas.
Vegas is a little bit more dynamic. It has the ability to do what you want, but you have to work a little bit harder for it.
Well, no, Vegas is just extremely buggy.
Yeah, constant crashes.
Yes, the crashes. I actually did a video on... It was like the perception of For Honor in the media that was unfamiliar with the game.
Dead game, quote unquote.
I'm not sure if that was the topic. I don't think it was, but it might have had a part to play in it. But in the making of that video, the game, my Sony Vegas crashed 200 plus times. I was keeping track. So it was like, after it crashed like 40 plus times, I was like, okay, no matter what, I'm finishing this video, but I'm also going to keep track of the crashes. And it was over 200 times my editing program crashed making that video.
Do you think it could be just like particular parts of it, or maybe a certain action that Vegas can't really handle?
I think they're greedy, lazy fucks.
Well, you don't have any arguments from me on that one.
I don't understand why they don't address those issues. Like, 'cause version after version of Vegas seems to be plagued with similar issues year on year on year. And yet they make huge amounts of money. I don't understand what they're doing.
So when you were initially going into the 9 to 5, I myself personally still work a 9 to 5, strictly speaking. I work a night shift job, and I go from 11 o'clock p.m. until 7 in the morning. It's good pay, and I'm very happy with my current position, but I don't really see it being my own career, and I'd like to do content creation as a more serious and more hard-ass thing, just because... I like having that freedom of being my own boss. I like having the freedom to express myself, to create a more, I suppose, entertaining experience for somebody else. So I completely get it whenever you feel like something is hurting you physically, whenever you aren't doing the thing that you feel like you were meant to do.
It's mentally.
Well, I mean, for me, it was physically. Back when I was going to college and I had first started content creation, I ended up developing really, really severe migraines. during the time that I was spending at college. I ended up dropping out because of it and tried pursuing YouTube for a while. Ended up making it past 10,000, and then I was like, okay, well, this isn't going quite fast enough for me to be sustaining myself since I was about to turn 21, and I really needed to get something going. So I went and I got a job, and the job itself was great. I've been doing well in that regard, but
it's never just, about the job, though, is it?
It isn't. It's about the feeling that you have. Like, there's a feeling in your gut that's like, I don't need to be here. There's something else.
Absolutely.
So, like, what was your, if you don't mind this question, what was the first job that you ended up working at? Like, what was your first industry?
Like ever?
Yeah.
I was an illegal bartender.
Oh, no! We both were! I was a bartender when I was 19.
I was an underage bartender. 19?
I was 19 when I was a bartender.
I was 17.
States for me, so 18 for you would be legal drinking age, correct?
Yes.
Right, and for me it's 21, so I was a couple years early.
I mean, I was waiter / bartender / cleaning kitchens / cleaning toilets, whatever, you know?
Pretty sure that's every waiter ever that works in any place that serves alcohol.
I mean, at least with a certain amount of staff, for sure.
I think overall in the cafe that I worked in, there was only 3 people that they hired for wait staff, so we all had to double as everything.
Yeah, in the smaller places, for sure.
Yeah. And did you enjoy the work that you were doing, or was it the work that drew you away, or what was it?
Back then?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a way to afford alcohol and pay for having a girlfriend and shit like that. I mean, I was in college, dude. That's pretty much the motivation.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I never really had any motivations like that, since typically I wouldn't really want to keep a relationship going. I never felt like things like that were a primary objective for me. Alcohol, yes, absolutely. If I can buy like a bottle every week or so and just kind of sip on it, that's more than willing for me. But
bottle of what?
I don't understand. Bottle of what? Let me see. Typically, I'll be going for like New Amsterdam, just if I'm going for something to relax with. But I could go for Jack Daniels, Gentleman's Jack.
Man, I don't know, man. We were going out 4 days a week. I don't know what to say to you.
I also just have a couple of shots lying around that I take on the daily.
It's just extra content creation. All right.
So what was it like where you initially grew up? What was the environment like?
I mean, it fucking sucked for me, dude. Like people were pretty good, like in my area, but I mean, my school experience is basically 15 years of bullying and not figuring out how to deal with it. So I mean, it was ass, I guess.
Did you have any support at home to help you out with the bullying, or were you just kind of on your own?
I mean,
to seclude yourself?
But like, you still got to go to fucking school, dude.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
I mean, I can't relate. I was homeschooled.
Go to school, and then like
I could. I was homeschooled, my guy.
Fucking homeschooling, yo, that's not an option.
It was for me, and I'm so happy that it was. I would have gotten bullied to high hell.
But like, I mean, that stopped when I had like a fucking big growth spurt, and then I got fucking really tall, and I was much stronger, and then all of a sudden, no one had an issue with me.
How tall are you even?
I'm 6'2".
Oh, you're an inch taller than me. Hell yeah.
So I mean, but I mean that's it's an old story. Like everyone and their grandmother is fucking bullied in school.
Well, yeah, everyone has their own personal experience.
I also think like there's a huge amount of character growth you get from people who had really rough time in school that you would never ever get from people who didn't.
That's true.
From my own personal experience, people who had really difficult time in school are far more understanding on the intricacies of the difficulties that one may have in life than people who didn't.
Right. I think that whenever you have hard experiences, it makes you a better person because you're more empathetic.
It's transferable, right? Like, so like, for example, I would say that people who had a very hard time in school as an outcast in school, and they learn from the experience in the right way, are a million times more likely to be beneficial to things like civil rights. Because they understand what it's like to be an outcast, and they understand what it's like to be pushed around because of X difference. It doesn't matter what the difference is, it's arbitrary, as it is arbitrary in civil rights. So someone who was pushed around for a long time in their youth and has learned from it correctly, because you can choose to go another way after those experiences. You can choose to be very, very bitter and become a very bad person as a result. But if you choose to learn from the experience, then, you know, you can become a more valuable human being than you would have been without it.
No, I completely get that one. For me, the difference is that I wasn't around a bullying environment or anything like that. I grew up and almost exclusively stayed at home. I had a church that I would go to, and as most churches do go these days, there was a lot of gossip and hypocrisy, and just, you don't really go to church for the church. That's how I always saw it, and it ended up getting worse and worse.
Sounds evangelical.
Evangelical? It was Pentecostal.
That would be under the evangelical banner where I'm from, kid.
Well, not all of us can be Catholics, all right? But for me, I ended up having my own personal traumatic experiences as a kid, not from bullying and from outside influence, but it was more of like a personal conflict with self. And that means that I didn't have that turning moment of, oh, I can become bitter and turn into some Disney villain that got bullied once when he was a kid.
It's not
and then
like that.
festered it.
You know, real villains don't see themselves as villains, do they?
No, I don't think they do. That's part of the way that empathy
they're the main
comes into
protagonist in their head.
Yeah. I just never let it really make me a bitter person, I don't think. Granted, I have a big mouth on me when it comes to people doing wrong things to wrong people. I'm always willing to put myself out there whenever I have a strong feeling towards something, but I try my best not to overstep my boundaries in most instances.
I mean, I'm a big fan of being blunt.
I mean, last night, so was I.
Good shit.
So, when it comes to the topic that I'm sure you knew was going to come up at some point, because I'm sure it comes up way more often than not, brother, every video. When it comes to you and your brother, the dynamic between the two of you, did you talk about the content creation side of things with him before you made your channel, or because I know you made yours way after he made his?
No,
you didn't discuss it at all.
No, actually, funnily enough, it's complete speculation. Actually, I may have entered content creation sooner if it wasn't for my brother.
Really?
Yes, because when he moved into content creation, and you're thinking back 2006, 2007, 2008, I immediately took a negative view on it. Because I myself believed that instead of pursuing the things I wanted to do, I pursued things that people told me I should pursue. So I should pursue college, I should pursue this and X and X and Y, career ladder. So when my younger brother then went on to pursue something different, because I'd already committed myself to those kinds of things, or at least convinced myself that they were correct, when he went on to pursue content creation way back in the day, I was like, what are you fucking doing? This is nuts. So that kind of established my opinion that it was a bad thing to do. I mean, it wasn't a case of he inspired me to do content creation. It was more a case of he proved me wrong about content creation.
That's a very humble way of looking at it, actually. That's impressive.
I mean, it's just the fucking way it was.
Yeah. And I looked back on your older videos and I found that he showed a lot of support on them. I don't know if he was ever any main support.
He got I mean, as you would with a family member, he got a good kick out of, like seeing something being created from someone who wasn't himself. I mean, imagine you're the only person in your family or your extended friends or whatever way you want to put it. You're the only person who makes content. And then some guy puts himself on the line. He's putting stuff out there. You get a little bit of a kick out of watching it, you know? You're
I'd be proud as hell if one of my family members did it.
You're kind of judging a little bit. You're like, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's bad. You know, you're having a look. You're having a look at it. You get a bit of a kick out of it. So it was like that in the start for sure.
That's actually really cool. I've always liked the fact that you guys aren't afraid to like talk about each other and have the banter, because I watched David's Draw My Life video. Mm-hmm. And during that, he brought you up and talked about the childhood a little bit and how you guys kind of interacted with one another. But he also mentioned that he was more of a loner for a couple of years. Were you around to experience that?
Absolutely. I mean, he's such like it went on to like help with his personality type went on to help with his career choice, very much so. In that he's very boisterous, but there is like there's 4 brothers in our family. So, you know, boisterous is going to make you stand out. So there was a lot of arguments when there's 4 brothers in the family, 1 video game console, only 1 set of parents. I mean, it's...
I can imagine it was hectic.
Look, dude, it's...
Mom said it's my turn on the Xbox.
It's literally Mom said it's my turn on the Xbox. That was our childhood. Whatever way you want to push that meme out from there, that's how it went. I mean,
that is beautiful.
That's how it was. And it's no joke. It's like, except for us, it was like Mom said it's my turn on Donkey Kong 64 on the Nintendo.
Donkey Kong
Fuck
Country,
off.
baby.
You know, it's my turn. And then, you know, Mom would come in getting angry and stuff. Like, you have to prove yourself that, you know, I'm the victim, not my brother. But, you know, Mom would never believe that because she's not a moron.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, it was just like pre-video game popularity, bunch of guys who like video games type family.
Okay, so after a brief interruption because of Discord quality and small issues therein, we will be continuing off the same thing, so it's not quite so jarring, I suppose. But with you having grown up with all those brothers and having that kind of a rambunctious dynamic where you bounce back and forth off of each other, always competing for who gets the Xbox or who gets this or that.
Yeah,
I know that
Mom
that can
says it's my turn, hands up!
I can imagine there were a lot of fights as well.
There was, you know, it actually gets more violent than I guess current political climate would like between brothers.
Uh-oh.
I mean, yo, dude, when it's your turn on the Xbox, shit is real.
It's about to get serious. You pull up, you say,
this guy is enjoying Halo gameplay and you're not. Right, that's a bit of an issue. That's a problem.
Give me the damn VR!
He's fighting the flood when I could be playing on Legendary with my friend.
Oh no, it turns into an IRL firefight. You're fighting off every brother at once.
Shit's rough.
For me, it was nothing like that. I had an older sister and a slightly older sister. I had one that's in her late 30s at this point and one that is only a year and a half older than me. So I wasn't close to the other one at all.
Something similar. I have sisters too, about 10 years older than me and a year younger than me.
Oh, that's cool. You got a big family.
Dude, we're Irish.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot. The potato famine had you guys really desperate for a while.
Yeah, it did, but we overcame it because we're not bitches.
Yeah, take that, England. But my older sister, the one that's slightly older than me, has always been like a really big impact in my life. And she doesn't know that, I don't think, to like the extent that she's been an impact. But I always try to make her seem appreciated.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, like it's funnily enough, like my earlier years, my older siblings were a bigger impact, but as I've gotten older, my younger siblings have been a bigger impact in my life. So,
and why would you say that is?
I mean, because you overlook when you're growing up, you have a very simple outlook on life before you get older, and that develops as a result of life experience. And for me, that was the case. And when I was getting older, I looked towards people that were older than me to how to behave, how to act, what was cool, what wasn't. And then as you get older, you ignore that factor, and it's just what's good, what's not good. And my younger brothers and sister are, in my opinion, exceptional people. So I learned a lot from them. They're better people than I am. And I mean, why not learn from them? I mean,
See,
when you're younger, you'll just be like, oh yeah, because they're younger than me, I'm not going to do that. But as you get older, you learn from, if you're wise about it, you'll learn from any source around you. You should have the mature enough ego to be able to accept lessons from wherever they come.
right, and something I've known for a while now is that whenever you have siblings or you have, life lessons that come their way whenever you're younger, often enough times you're going to be learning the same things that they're learning at the same time that they're learning it. So you'll have little pieces of advice that you're getting years early because someone else is learning it years later in their life, but you're there to witness it and kind of understand it a bit better and have more time to reflect on it when you're younger,
I mean, look, life's weird, dude. Like, it depends on your circumstances in your family, where you're from, how you're born, all that jazz. But for sure, you want to be as much as possible learning from wherever you can. And I mean, the sooner you realize that, the better.
See, with growing up with my sister, we were always in the same boat, but kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. She was always the parent's child and was always the golden goose of the family, So they would always praise her for being such a good girl. And this was when we were really young, right? And so I would have to constantly be thinking, she's the overachiever. She's going to be getting better PR from the parents, and I'll have to just understand that and move on with my life. So I was doing a lot of stuff that was...
I mean, just a little bit of that, but I mean, I feel as though it's pretty natural.
It is, but I was always kind of falling into things that were more unhealthy and bad habits, bad speaking patterns, just being more rude, I suppose, to people, just because I didn't expect myself to be getting anything as good as what my sister was getting. But as time went on, I actually found out that, I'm not the only person experiencing this kind of an emotion. I'm not the only person that's going through this. I understood that she was going through the same thing as me. As time went on, we actually kind of switched roles. Now I get really good PR from the parents, and she doesn't get quite so good as she used to. So it kind of switched us around a little bit and made us completely opposites as people once again, but we just kind of switched places, if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, it does, because, like, as a parent, imagine you had a child right now. I mean, you've got a framework.
I hope I don't.
You've got a framework in your head of what that ideal adult would turn out to be as a result of that child. And whoever fits the framework the closest is more than likely going to be making you happier than the person who doesn't fit the framework of your ideal imagining of that adult. I mean, so if you look at it in terms of your parent is a human being, they are dealing with the same struggles as you are as a human being. They feel the same way as you are as a human being. And they have the same hopes and doubts and fears as you have. Well, then it makes sense that they also have, you know, a framework or I'm calling it framework, but they have the imagined ideal child, which if anyone listening right now, I mean, and you were to imagine having a son or daughter, and then you imagine, obviously, as a result of having a son or daughter, imagining that son or daughter is now a man or a woman, you would have a framework for which, like, oh, this is a good person, this is a bad person, etc. Like, whether that person fits that profile or not would result in how happy or not you are with it. Well, I mean, life doesn't really go that way, but I mean, I think it's a fairly simple explanation for why one person may feel closer to a parent than another.
Yeah, I mean, so your initial child that you first have, what you're saying is that you have that framework and you're picturing like a good person. Whenever you're raising the second one, it's never going to be the same. And when you move on from that one, it's never going to be the same.
I mean, yeah, because the framework's going to change too. Like, after, and new parents are going to be, bamboozled like super hard. Like, they always have been, they always will be. New parents are bamboozled like crazy by being a parent in the first place.
We have too many successful families. We need to buff bamboozle.
Put damage on it.
Exactly. Make Haymaker do an extra 15%.
So, like, but you get the point I'm trying to make on, like, your parents are human, and that human has ideals. And those ideals are either met or not met. Do you know what I'm saying?
Nobody's perfect. Whenever you're young, you look at your parents and you think that they are, but then later you understand.
Here's the thing then, like, if you have a good parent, they will understand the failures of the ideals. And if you have a bad parent, they won't understand the failures of the ideals. Like,
it makes sense. It's a lot of
your
thinking from the outside in.
Huge fucking hot take.
Nah, really, I didn't think so. I thought I was just brought by the pelican. That's all. Or the stork. That's it.
Sacred child.
Sacred child. I don't look like anybody in my family. I'm the only person with blonde hair. I might as well have come from a stork.
Suspicions.
Big sus. Big sus. Well, I think that's actually a pretty interesting note that I think we could probably end on and be pretty comfortable with. So I didn't really have any more hot take questions. Nothing really to pick your brain apart with. But I think this was a lot of fun for a first episode, and I really appreciate you coming out. So thank you very much for your time and patience with me trying this new format.
No worries, dude.
And for everybody listening in the YouTube side of things, if you would kindly go over and subscribe to Zero Crake if you are not already, subscribe to him, subscribe to my main channel, as well as if you are exclusively listening to the podcast, you can subscribe to that channel as well. ClutchCast is going to be an ongoing thing. It might be weekly, it might be bi-weekly, I'm not entirely sure yet, but I will figure something out along the lines, and I will have a lot more episodes recorded throughout this week, so you guys can look forward to a lot more content in the future. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you all have a fantastic day. I will see you next time, and as always, stay sharp.